Yes, yes, yes. Welcome back. Thanks for stopping by for another episode of the Format Podcast. This week, no college football. We did a lot of that last week after the biggest game of the year so far, so I'll let it breathe this week, especially with a bunch of the games being canceled due to COVID, unfortunately, all right? In the NFL, is Phillip Rivers stunting running back development? What's going on with the Patriots? And we have no idea who's going to win the Super Bowl. On the NBA front, we're going to talk some hoops. And of course, if we do that, who's with us? Our official Format Podcast hoops analyst, Andy Noel, joins to drop some knowledge about Isiah Thomas, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. But before we get to that, let's knock out the particulars. You can find me right here on YouTube. Just go in the search bar, type in The Format Podcast, and I should come right up. Make sure to click on that subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen, and then click on the bell so you get notified when new shows are up. You can also find the audio version of this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is on iTunes. It's on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you listen. But make sure you head over to iTunes. Make sure you give us that 5-star rating, 5. It helps a lot. And you have no idea how much it helps. The more you give us those 5 stars, the more we rise in the rankings and the more we can keep doing this show for you. All right. And then just subscribe on whatever podcast application you use. I'm also on social media. On Twitter, you can find me at Bruce F.A. Hope. That's at Bruce F.A. Hope. And on Instagram, you can find me at The Format Podcast. That's at The Format Podcast. You can also email the show. The address is theformatpodcast@outlook.com. You can send me comments, questions, whatever. And if you want to send new questions, I've actually started a new segment. It's called the Mailbag segment, and definitely looking for feedback from you guys. If it's on social media, just send me your question and put hashtag mailbag at the end of it. If it's via email, type mailbag in caps in the subject line of your email. I'll do my best to go through them and answer your questions and statements, what have you, directly on the show, all right? I definitely look forward to the interaction. I don't care if you tell me I'm an idiot, the dumbest person talking sports. Just tell me why. We can debate it. We can talk about it. Also, if you reach out to me, you can suggest different topics. You can tell me where I was right, where I was wrong. Give me different takes. Maybe help me see something I hadn't thought of before, okay? I don't care what you do. I just love the interaction. Thanks, John. So, yeah, make sure you do that. And now we've got all that out of the way. Let's get to it. Sit back, relax, and listen up to episode 82 of The Format. Last night, well, it might be last night, depending on when you're watching this, the Colts beat the Titans in the AFC South matchup 34-17, right? And these are the two best teams in the division, and they're both 6-3 on the season. So that probably is going to come down to the wire in terms of who wins that divisional race. And watching it, I thought a couple things were interesting, right? A couple things came to me. So the first is that the Colts were pretty much able to contain Derrick Henry, the league rushing leader. He had 19 carries for 103 yards, which on his face, that sounds like a solid night, right? 5.4 yards per carry, over 100 yards in the night. But the Colts didn't really let him take over the game the way we've seen him do that in a lot of games in the past, especially like last season's postseason run to the AFC Championship game, right? Okay. Overall, Tennessee did a pretty good job on the ground with 157 rushing yards as a team, but they didn't get much from Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback. He didn't even pass for 150 yards on the night, and he had a QBR of 45 on a scale of 1 to 100. Yeah, not great, right? On the other side, Phillip Rivers had a throwback type of game. He was 29 of 39 for 309 yards with a TD and no turnovers, which is like amazing for him. But then I thought about it and I said, well, is that actually a throwback game with offensive numbers easier than ever to stack up in the modern NFL? Like, they want scoring. They're not throwing as many flags. They're reducing the penalties. Obviously, defense can't do what it does for the most part. The goal is to boost scoring, which I guess is cool and exciting for the lay fan, but it kind of, for me, takes away from when you see teams and players putting up big numbers. But that's a discussion for another day, right? So regardless, Phillip Rivers, he had a pretty good night. But that brings me to the second thing that I found interesting, okay? If you've been with me on this podcast for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Jonathan Taylor, the Colts rookie running back who he was a record-setting workhorse back in college at Wisconsin, right? So quick recap on Jonathan Taylor. I felt like, and I talked about this on previous episodes of the podcast prior to the draft, I felt like the Titans should have put the franchise tag on Derrick Henry. They should have drafted Jonathan Taylor and let him split carries this season, getting Jonathan Taylor ready for the starring role next season so they wouldn't have to pay Derrick Henry a big contract. That's what I would have done, but so be it. If you had done that, you get younger, you get healthier, you get a workhorse back who can step right into a pro-style, run-heavy offense that he's been in his entire life, right? Obviously, it didn't go that way. Jonathan Taylor ends up with the Colts, which finally gets me to that second interesting thing. If you remember, Phillip Rivers played for about 3 years with another all-time great Wisconsin running back, Melvin Gordon III, when they were in San Diego and then Los Angeles with the Chargers, okay? Melvin Gordon III, he couldn't really get himself going for a while in that offense playing with Phillip Rivers. Now, in Indiana, Jonathan Taylor can't really get himself going in the run game either. All right, so what's the common denominator among two all-time great college running backs who were bell cow guys and came into the league with a lot of promise? Yes, Phillip Rivers. Now, in fairness, we could say maybe it's Wisconsin's system that guys get set up to put up all-world rushing numbers in college. Maybe we could say that. You got Ron Dane, the former all-time leader in rushing yards in a career in college. You've got Monty Ball, who was the single-season rushing yardage and touchdowns leader. You got Melvin Gordon III, he has the second highest single-game rushing total and I think the second highest yards per carry average in college. And now you've got Jonathan Taylor, who has the most rushing yards in college history through their first 3 years, right? But then you say, all these guys were so great in college, but what did they do on the professional level, right? Is Wisconsin preparing them for the pros? Who knows, right? Okay, so you got to ask that question. But at least with the last two, Melvin Gordon III and Jonathan Taylor, they have that common denominator of Phillip Rivers, who even at this stage of his career is not going to play in a run-heavy offense. He did that early in his career with LaDainian Tomlinson, but you haven't seen it since. And it really is an interesting thing to pay attention to. I don't know. Anyway, let's switch to this. New England Patriots, Cam Newton. What is going on there? What's Bill Belichick's plan? Everyone figured that with Tom Brady gone, the Pats wouldn't be as good. I think that's like common consensus, and you didn't have to be Nostradamus or some sort of genius to figure that one out, right? But in Bill we trust, right? That's what they say. In Bill we trust, okay? The greatest coach of all time is there, so we figured he'd be able to keep things afloat. But now New England's 3-5. It doesn't look like they're tanking, but they just aren't good, all right? They've got almost zero skill position talent. The defense is nowhere near what it was last season. And after what looked like a promising start, Cam Newton is looking lost, and he is not playing well. I think it's safe to assume that Cam Newton is never again going to be the Cam who won an MVP and took the Panthers to the Super Bowl. I think that's a safe assumption. But again, the question here for me is, what is Bill's plan? Is it really about making a splash or doing something special in the draft? Could be. Except the Patriots, for the most part, have never really drafted particularly well, especially at the skill positions. So then you got to ask yourself, what's going to happen? You can be sure there are very few teams who are going to want to make trades that are going to help New England get back on top. Everybody's sick of that. The greatest and most dominant dynasty in NFL history may officially be over. And in case you're getting ready to argue, let me shut that down right now. 20 years, 9 Super Bowl appearances, 6 championships, 9 AFC titles, and 17 division titles. Yes, greatest, most dominant dynasty in NFL history. Don't argue. It is what it is. Okay. So now, I guess you just think, well, we've never seen anything like that before, and it's probably fair to say that we never will again. So you also have to wonder, is Belichick thinking about moving on? I mean, why not, right? Brady needed to change the scenery. Why not Belichick? And the other question is, if he does, can he take his unique brand of leadership somewhere else and have the same kind of success? I think it takes a lot to institute that Patriot way and institute that culture in a whole new place. I don't know if he has the time or the energy left to do that. Maybe, maybe not. Would it work? If he does move, where would he go? He realistically doesn't have anything to prove. He's got 6 titles as a head coach and 2 more as a defensive coordinator with the Giants under Bill Parcells, who coincidentally is regarded as an all-time great coach, but I take that one with a grain of salt because he never won anything without Bill Belichick. Well, you can't say he never won anything. He never won another championship without Bill Belichick on his staff. So I think there's something to be said for that. Anyway, but guys who win at that level, they just have this psychotic level of competitiveness that just doesn't go away. It just doesn't. So I don't know. I really don't. But you can bet before any of that, Bill Belichick is going to be laser focused on Sunday night against the Ravens because that's just what he does. The last time they played Baltimore, they were undefeated and 8-0 last season and got completely shredded by Lamar Jackson on his way to an MVP season and that offense, right? So I wouldn't doubt that Belichick has been studying that game film since then, and it won't be nearly as easy for the Ravens this time around. But I can't see the Patriots winning this game. I just can't. So just over halfway through the year, we're now getting the kind of season in the NFL that we wish we could see in the NBA. We actually don't have any idea who's going to win the championship. And that is a beautiful thing in sports, right? It gives you something to watch, something to think about, something to really, be left in awe over, right? It's hard to even have a favorite in the NFC. You've got some really good teams, but all of them have shown weaknesses, and they're all susceptible to certain matchups. You got Russell Wilson playing like an MVP.
Thank you, guys.
And
Go
the
Hawks.
Seahawks can beat anybody. We've seen it. But they can also get beat by anybody because their defense can't stop me and 10 of my friends. It's bad. The Bucks and Tom Brady are dangerous, but because they got beat twice in the division by the Saints, they're going to have to make it in the playoffs as a wild card. And if they want to win a championship or even get there, they got to win multiple road playoff games, which Tom Brady has never done in the same postseason. There's another problem. Then you got the Packers, who are dangerous and have a great offense, but we saw the Bucks take them apart a few weeks ago, right? The NFC is crazy. On the other side, we pretty much penciled in the defending champion Chiefs as the AFC representatives to the Super Bowl before the season started. We said it's either going to be the Chiefs or the Ravens. The Ravens don't look quite the same as they did last year. The Chiefs still playing good ball, oddly enough, really quietly. So be it. But now look at the Steelers. They're undefeated. They have a ferocious defense. They're playing good offense. What do we do with them? They might mess around and have home field advantage through the playoffs. So then the Chiefs might have to go to Heinz Field and try to win that game. That could totally change things, right? Right. The Ravens, they're going to make the playoffs, right? As the second team from that division. And who knows if Cleveland pulls out a wild card. the AFC North might end up with 3 teams in the playoffs. And hey, I don't know if I can see Cleveland winning a playoff game, but once you get in, who knows what happens, right? Okay. The Bills, they look like they're going to be the team that's going to take the AFC East crown away from the Patriots, but no one thinks they're going to win the conference. Again, once you get in, who knows? You get hot, you get on a run, right? No one thought the Giants were going to win the championship the 2 years that they did it. They got in, they got hot. That's all it takes. All in all, the second half of the NFL season and the jockeying for playoff position may be even better than usual this season, and the playoffs are going to be crazy. Tell him, Bart Scott.
Can't wait.
You know what it is, and you know who it is. We talk NBA on this podcast. You know who's going to be with me. I got my official format podcast, NBA and hoops analyst, Andy Noel, with me. Andy, what's going on, man?
Brother Bruce, everything's good, my dude. Everything's good.
Nice.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, always. So, just a couple things I wanted to talk about today. First, let me give you a little bit of my take on something that's important to me as a man, right? As a man, something I think is important is being able to identify when you're wrong or when you didn't think something through and look at it with a lot wider lens that it deserved, right? So to an extent, this might be something I need to do in this particular case, right? A couple episodes back, you weren't on, but I talked about Isiah Thomas and how I feel that he's out of his mind for what I see as blatant disrespect to Michael Jordan and him not putting Michael Jordan on his Mount Rushmore, right? His top 4 players of all time. So quick flashback on that. His Mount Rushmore is LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, and Dr. J. I discussed that already, so I'm not really going to get too much into it. But like I said, it's okay that not everyone sees Michael Jordan as the GOAT. Again, you say that to me, I'm going to debate you. I think you're wrong. I think that Michael Jordan is the GOAT, and I don't think there should be too much argument. But that's for a different day, right? I think it's ridiculous that Isiah didn't even have Michael Jordan in his top 4, but that is what it is. So looking back, though, where I think I was wrong, really examining this whole thing is I couldn't understand something else that Isiah Thomas said. He said that he feels like Michael Jordan is the 5th toughest competitor that he ever played against. And again, when he said that, I'm like, are you insane? You've been on the court with this dude. You watched all the things he could and did do. You went to war with him, 4 years straight in the Eastern Conference, going from sweeping his Bulls 4-0 all the way to 7-game series. And then finally they swept you 4-0 to move on and claim their place at the top of the mountain. Got it. But now looking back, I finally get why he said that, right? He had to go through Dr. J and the 76ers, Isiah Thomas, that is. He had to go through Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics. Then he had to go through Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to finally break through and win a championship, okay? I get it. All those guys stood in his way and posed a bigger challenge to him and his team. Now, Michael Jordan and the Bulls didn't stand in his way. He stood in theirs. So looking deeper, I now see why he has MJ as his 5th toughest player competition. We talked a little bit about this before we got on air. Why don't you share with the listeners and the viewers your thoughts on that?
Put in that context, it makes sense. Because Isiah is, and this is where the sports media really confuses the listener, the novice listener specifically. They give the impression that all of these guys were kind of all happening at the same time. When you look at the chronology, though, right, like the argument is, oh, Jordan couldn't get past Bird. Bird was winning his first NBA chip when Jordan was winning his chip in North Carolina against Georgetown.
Correct.
Right. So that gives you some context. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's in what? That's 82?
81, 82. Yeah.
Right. So 2 years later, Jordan is in the league. Right. A team that's not winning championship, that's not getting to the playoffs at all of a sudden is in the playoffs because of this supernova that doesn't seem to have doesn't seem to know where he fits in the equation, right? Is playing above his level. And I think because of Jordan's quick ascension, they put the Bulls amongst those other teams as well. You use using Isiah. Isaiah's actually right in that Jordan wasn't competition for him. He was competition for Jordan simply based on the chronology.
Correct.
Right? By the time 84 came up, by the time the Bulls were fielding a team that was competitive, the Pistons were contenders and about to win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
So the timelines are different. And Isiah is talking about the people he had to get past. I don't even think Jordan should be, if that is the criteria that he is using, Jordan's not even in that conversation. Mm-hmm. Because by the time Chicago became a force, mm-hmm. the Pistons had already shot their load. Mm-hmm. Right? And here's another thing that gets lost because today's TV media either doesn't know much or doesn't know how to report it. The Cavs with Brad Daugherty, Mark Price, Ron Harper, and Larry Nance, those guys were actually supposed to be the next ones up. They had a squad. Mm-hmm. In '89, when Jordan hits the shot on Elo, they had beat the Bulls 6-0 that season. So the reality is the Chicago Bulls kind of leapfrogged the Cavs to jump into that position. So Isiah is right in saying that Jordan wasn't one of his toughest competitors because he wasn't trying to get through Jordan. He was essentially trying to keep Jordan down, right? Okay, let me keep this dude in my rearview mirror. We hear them, but they're not our focus because you got the teams that were a force back then, Milwaukee Bucks, 76ers, the Celtics, right? Those were the guys that were on Isaiah's radar, the guys who he had to get past. So Jordan wasn't considering those guys opponents. They weren't in that conversation, right? The Bulls were not in that conversation, as I'd mentioned to you earlier. Mm-hmm. Dave Corzine was the starting center for the Bulls. Brad Sellers was the starting small forward. Rory Sparrow was the starting point guard, right? Charles Oakley was the starting power forward. Orlando Woolridge was on that squad. Sidney Green was on that squad. Listen, shout out to those guys, respect those guys, but those guys weren't going to be along for the ride, right? Players had to develop, right? The same way, the one thing you have to give credit to I think his name was Jack McCloskey. Mm-hmm. Jack McCloskey. He started putting that team together around Isiah pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Where they went and got Lambeer from the Cavs, where they went and got Buda Edwards from the Suns, where they got Vinnie Johnson from the Spurs, and they drafted the youngsters, Dumars,
and then Dennis Rodman
and mm-hmm. Sally. Right now, you're developing these players, and you had Adrian Dantley who was getting busy, mm-hmm. right? Isiah had a squad, and that squad was struggling getting past the Celtics, right? I think they had done enough to get past all the other teams, but the Celtics were still in their way. I think the Celtics beat them twice, so they finally got past the Celtics. But the Celtics were finished by the time they got to them, right? They had their run, right? It's the comparisons that are made don't make sense, right? Now, having said that, Isiah and the Pistons still had juice in their tank, right? By the time Jordan had gotten there, because if he had followed the timeline, the Cavs would have been battling with the Pistons. Mm-hmm. The Bulls would have been battling, trying to get past the Cavs. But again, The way things worked out, they worked out. So by the time Jordan and the Bulls had gotten to Isiah and them, they were already done, right? They still had gas in their tank, but you got this young upstart who's basically about to dominate. And I think where the people where people who are the average listener doesn't understand, or the average fan doesn't understand, it would be the equivalent of saying, "Oh wow, the Lakers keep beating the
Nuggets.
Lakers keep beating the Nuggets." They were supposed to beat the Nuggets. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how it's supposed to go,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or let's use another example. Oh wow, the Boston should be beating Toronto, or Boston should be today's Celtics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today's Celtics should have beat Miami. Technically, you got a bunch of upstarts on a team who are still figuring out how to win, right? There's a natural progression to the way that the game, at least the way the game used to be played.
Mm-hmm.
Today's players have now microwave success, so now everybody thinks you just win a championship just because you got 15 guys on a roster.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to scratch and claw and figure out how to play the game, and take your bumps and your bruises, and then figure out how to win.
Absolutely. And I think that Magic is pretty much the only all-timer who was able to just walk in, Magic and I guess maybe Duncan, pretty much able to walk in and immediately win. But again, those guys were able to. Right.
They walk into good situations.
Mm-hmm. I hear that. So, okay. Let's talk about another point guard. All right. Now, a current one who a lot of people think is an all-time great at the position, Russell Westbrook. No.
Wait, back up. Wait, you said all of that to say Russell Westbrook?
A lot of people think he's an all-time great, and I was going to get to that. I have no idea who in their right mind or why you would say that. But a lot of people think that, and we know we live in an era where statistics dictate everything, so that's probably what it is, right? 3 straight years, he averaged triple-double, blah, blah, blah. So that's it. But anyway, apparently Westbrook is asked out of Houston. I think this was bound to happen. I'm not sure who thought it would be a good idea, and I know you and me talked about it, for Westbrook and Harden, 2 of the most ball-dominant players maybe ever to play together. It doesn't make it. I think you had to – I'm just so astounded by this, because I'm like, anybody with half a brain had to know that wasn't long for whatever franchise it was going to be on, right? We see that Russell Westbrook just doesn't work with other stars just because of his style of play. But again, different argument. But now it doesn't help that Russ's name is floated in trade rumors, which apparently he heard and figured he would beat the Rockets to the punch, get ahead of the curve, however you want to say it, and ask for the trade. So I guess the question is, number one, did you think this could possibly work, Westbrook and Harden playing together? And number two, where are you on Russell Westbrook asking out of the Rockets?
So I thought it could work depending on the scenario. So here's the problem. These guys, they decided to give up on playing with conventional big men. If your tallest guy's like 6'7", 6'8", and you're playing against legitimate 7-footers, you're in trouble. Right, especially skillful 7-footers like Anthony Davis, who's essentially a tall, small forward. Mm-hmm. You're putting yourself, you're relying heavily on the 3-point shot to be able to win the games for you. If the other team understands that you don't have an inside presence, and all they got to do is defend the perimeter by doubling Harden on the perimeter, and taking the ball away from him, right? Taking the ball out of his hands, and now making Russell Westbrook your decision maker. The reality is you're going to end up exactly where you were. Did I think it was going to work? I think it could have worked. I think they were built to beat the Lakers, but I think a lot of things had to go right. I think Russell Westbrook having that quad injury and then dealing with COVID kind of derailed them. Mm-hmm. He wasn't 100%, and the Lakers were forcing him to shoot. And for those who call him an all-timer, I guess my definition of what all-timer means and what it doesn't is different, right? I guess I see it differently because you at least got to be able to shoot the ball. And his jump shot is sporadic at best, right? But yeah, I thought was this. I'm surprised he's asking to leave, to be completely honest with you, because they talked about how much they got along. They were childhood friends, and they're going to make it work. And they had played together in OKC. So I wonder, right? He was playing great ball in the beginning of the season. Right, he according to some of the things that I've listened to, he was having his most efficient season. So,
but
for him
he couldn't stand doing that, because if you notice, halfway to 3/4 of the way through the season, he started playing Westbrook ball again and taking back over. I think he was leading the league in scoring and shots and all that. He couldn't be this quote unquote second fiddle. He couldn't be that.
At the end of the day, a guy like him, unfortunately, because if without his athleticism, he's not even in the league, right? Because he's not a skill player.
No.
Right? He's a tenacity athlete, right? He's a tenacious athlete who just happens to be dribbling the ball. And the idea of being able to play off the ball would denote that you know how to play. That's not his skill set. He doesn't know how to. That's not what he does.
Right.
So I'm surprised by the ask, and I wonder, okay, where do you think there's room for you?
And that was actually my next question. You went right to it. First, he's got the huge contract. I think he's making like $44 or $48 million over the next 2 years. Now, the first thing I got to say about that is I'm on the fence with that one, because obviously we know pro sports, you got to get your money where you can get it, right? A lot of times these guys don't want to pay you, and you have to get your money. Now, good thing, basketball, the contract's fully guaranteed, so you get every penny of that one way or another, unless you do something stupid to void the contract. But for the most part, you're going to get all your money. So my thing is, we can't use the contract as being prohibitive and let Russell complain about that, because, hey, you took the money. You should have thought about that. If it came down to it, that might be prohibitive in terms of you going somewhere else or going somewhere you want to be. Now, there's number one, the big contract. Now, second, where's a good fit? Because I don't see a good fit for this guy anywhere.
I just heard Charlotte earlier today, though.
I don't think that's a good fit. I just think they don't have much. So he's, I heard Charlotte. I heard the Knicks. Again, Broadway might be a good place for him. They don't have much either. He's exciting. He will inject energy back into the world's most famous arena.
The problem with that, though, is, right, are the Knicks trying to win now, or are they trying to create a culture? Because they have a larger issue, which is a culture problem, right? They are in the process of trying to change how they are perceived by the rest of the league.
And they have a coach who's not going to be playing that. Tom Thibodeau is not going to be playing that Russell Westbrook game.
Agreed, right? You're not going to just sit here and run crazy and lose him.
No.
Because so one could say, well, he had Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is a better player than Russell Westbrook.
Yeah. He played within the system, and he attempted to defend, which Russell Westbrook will not do.
And he can finish in traffic.
Right.
Russell Westbrook can't finish in traffic.
Well, a lot of people would say he can dunk on you. A lot of people would argue.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but again, right? So when all a player can do is dunk, that's saying a lot, right? Because you can close off the front of the rim. What are you going to do now, right? Are you going to dunk every time you're down there? It's not a video game. But yeah,
it's not 2K21. It's not.
No. Maybe 26. But
right,
yeah, I don't know where he goes. If Charlotte makes sense, I guess, from a buzz standpoint, but I don't know if Mike's going to pay this dude $40 million or whatever that number is. But he's a Jordan athlete, so that might help. But yeah, it's without a doubt an interesting set of circumstances. Because I think his ego was bruised, kind of like to the point you made earlier, where he's just standing around and watching. You know, Harden dribble the life out the ball, um, and he doesn't necessarily have the game or the requisite skill set to be able to just go from bringing the ball down the court and just doing whatever he feels like doing. That autonomy to be able to just come down there. And you got to figure, listen, to be fair to him, how long has he been in the league? Since 2010?
I was about to say
No,
10
no,
years
no.
now, right?
Yeah, he's been in the league for a while, right? So given that scenario, he's used to doing what he wants to do. His instincts, you'd have to be a really skilled player like Chris Paul. Chris Paul was able to play off the ball because Chris Paul's got a skill set, right? Chris Paul is a fundamentally sound basketball player. No one will ever accuse Russell Westbrook of being a fundamentally sound basketball player.
Right.
So in order to be able to play off the ball, in order to be able to have those instincts, your skills got to be intact. That's not his game.
And we're also seeing the injuries mount with him, which means father time is catching up, which means the athleticism will start to wane, which means he will physically have to slow down, which means his deficiencies will become more and more glaring.
I could not have said it any better, right? So now he needs to rely more heavily on his athleticism when playing off the ball. And he doesn't have a lot of that. He does not have a lot of that left, right? You're only going to be able to do that, but for so long, like Charles Barkley says, we are all allowed a certain amount of jumps. Once we start getting close to that number,
right,
you can see the deterioration. So now it depends. Again, I don't think he's trying to win a championship. He doesn't. I don't care what roster you put him on, unless he's sitting on a bench. I don't see him winning the championship. He's not going to be the catalyst to why a team wins, right?
No, he's not.
You got to figure that team that they took to the championship against the Heat. Him and Harden were the reasons why they lost. Durant showed up. Durant was putting up 35, 30, almost 36 points a game. And on 55% shooting, so he wasn't a problem. But the other two guys kind of fell apart, which was indicative of it was just a harbinger of things to come, because you see what ended up happening for both of them down the line in the playoffs. But yeah, I think if Charlotte's the only team that I see, I don't have any answers, man. I have no clue where this dude's gonna end up. I think it was a dumb idea. I think it's an ego boost. Maybe the feeling that he had in the bubble kind of the way things look for him in the bubble. Maybe he just wants to get out of there. Don't know.
Fair enough. Finally, let's go back to the Rockets for a second. This is something I've been thinking about. I've been hearing all this talk over the last 3 or 4 years about how great Harden is. And we heard former Rockets GM Daryl Morey talking about Harden being the greatest scorer in the history of the game. And we hear all the so-called NBA pundits and the sports media members. And that's us too, by the way. So when you say sports media, that's us too now.
So I'm sports media?
Hey, we're sports media. We're here. We're on media. We're talking it, right?
Nah, I'm out of here, bro. I'm quitting. This is my last day.
But when we hear that, we hear them saying how Harden is up there with Wilt and Michael Jordan among the greatest scorers. And I'm not going to get into how many points Harden scores off violations. I'm not going to do that because I've done it ad nauseum. But regardless, at what point are we going to start holding James Harden, as great as he is under today's rules and guidelines, as great as he is, at what point are we going to start holding this guy accountable for the Rockets not winning and for other stars not being able to play with him? Because let's think about it. He got Dwight Howard when Dwight Howard was still good. He got him out of there. Melo could have been there. Melo was gone. Chris Paul, he got traded. Now Russell Westbrook is going to be gone. At what point are we going to notice this guy is the common denominator?
So for me, I don't assume every player is going to win a chip.
No, I get that.
I just don't. Right.
But when you
I
talk
think,
about a guy on that level,
well, it depends on who's doing the talking. Right. So equating him in any way to Jordan is foolish.
utterly ridiculous.
It's foolish, right? And
Mhm.
listen, this is not to deify Jordan at all, right? It's just really, really, really simple. Just looking at a comparison between the two players, that's not even a comparison you can make.
Mm-hmm.
But a guy like I have low expectations for Harden. He doesn't play a game efficient enough to win championships to be the catalyst as to why your team wins a championship.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there, right? So there's certain kinds of players in this. So to me, right, there's a couple of kind of players, and there's guys who just gonna come out here and bust your ass, right? They're just
Mm-hmm.
gonna come out here and give you numbers, right? That's Melo. That was probably KD before KD decided that he started letting the pressure get to him. Guys who just or Kyrie or Harden, they're just gonna come out here and give you buckets.
Mm-hmm.
A championship might not even be on their horizon. They're not even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to come out here and hoop. You got the guys, then you have the guys who basically are locked in. Yeah, I gotta win a chip. I need to win a chip, so on and so forth. And they're gonna do whatever they want to do, and that's your LeBrons and what have you. Then you got the guys who are just fakers, who will pretend enough. Yeah, but they really just want to get paid. That's your man,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
put him on. And I like him as a player, but Rudy Gay just wants to get paid, right? Give my money, right? DeMar DeRozan, these guys just want to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not really trying to win a championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be great if I did, but give me my money.
Right.
And so Harden he's entertainment, right? I don't know if he's necessarily looking to win a chip. I think he wants to come out here and hoop. You got some guys who are just flat out gym rats and they just want to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do the politics, right? That's why
Right.
that's why I like a Durant, right? Durant's doesn't really like the media and doesn't understand the scrutiny and what have you, because the reality is he just wants to come out here and hoop,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then you have the other guys who are like, yeah, no matter what, I have to win a championship and I'll move heaven and earth and I'm going to play all the politics and I'm going to move all the players. I'm going to manipulate the rosters and do everything I can and still, and all in an effort to win a championship. Harden's not in that category. Harden can go jump on somebody else's team.
Right.
He can go do that easily, but that would require him to alter his game.
Mm-hmm.
He's not altering his game.
Right.
Right. So it's holding him accountable per se is for me. I depends on who's looking, right? It's in the eye of the beholder. I don't think what am I holding him accountable for? I didn't expect much out of him.
Mm-hmm.
I expected. Go ahead.
No, I was saying finally, real quick before we get out of here, Chris Paul. What do you see as being his future? He showed me in particular. I've never been a huge Chris Paul fan. I have my reasons for that, which some might find ridiculous, but I have my reasons. But he really showed me and a lot of other people how much gas he still has in the tank and how good he is with what he was able to do for Oklahoma City last year. What do you see as being his future in the NBA?
So it looks like he's going to either end up. It looks like he's either going to end up on the Clippers, in Phoenix, or in Philadelphia. I think Phoenix probably is a lock. According to what I've heard so far, but what do I know? By no means am I connected. But him and Devin Booker supposedly get along pretty well. The only thing for me is I don't know what that level of compatibility is because of Devin, because both of them are kind of ball dominant. I think if you put him on the Clippers win the championship. I think because you don't like Chris Paul, which is cool. I think Chris Paul is a quintessential point guard, especially in today's league.
Absolutely.
Right? He's a little bit of a throwback, but he still fits into what today's league looks like. I think if you put him in Philadelphia, I think there might be some there's going to be some synergies there. Ben Simmons is going to have to go, and
I was just about to say Ben Simmons.
Yeah, he's got to go. He's useless in that scenario. He's useless. But Tobias Harris will become a much more efficient player. Joel Embiid will become a significantly more efficient player. And some of their other pieces will start to blend well, right? Will start to coalesce well with him there, because Chris Paul doesn't have to play fast in order to be effective. Ben Simmons does, which puts wear and tear on all the other players. But yeah, I think from what I heard yesterday, Stephen A. Smith said he doesn't want to go to Los Angeles. He doesn't want to be a guy that joins a team, to the Clippers, that is. Not the Clippers, excuse me, the Lakers. He doesn't want to be the guy that plays on the team that's that simply just gets put on the team and add water and go. He wants to be the catalyst as to why that team wins. So I could see, in this order, from what I've heard, the Suns, the Clippers, or Philadelphia.
I like all three of those, and I'll say real quick, and then we'll get out of here. The Lakers aren't a fit because, again, what are you going to do with a true Hall of Fame level point guard playing with LeBron James? If you take the ball out of LeBron's hands, what's he going to do? It doesn't work.
He's going to send you subtweets.
Right. All you're going to do is end up really, denigrating Chris Paul's role, Chris Paul's ability, and it just doesn't work. So
he knows that.
Is totally irrelevant, and he can't be dumb enough to do that.
He knows that. I think he knows that as well. I think he's using the cover of, I don't want to come onto a team that's already established. But I think that's specifically right. I'm not going to stand on the 3-point line waiting for you to pass the ball like I did with James Harden. I've been there, done that. So it's I think fit wise, I think you put him on the Clippers and they win the championship. I think he has enough of what they need to make that happen.
Fair enough. So we'll leave it there. Andy, thanks so much for joining the format, giving us your outlook on the NBA and All Matters Hoops. Once again, appreciate it, man.
Thanks. I appreciate you being here, man. This is cool.
All right. See you next time.
Yep.